Hello viewers, my name is Naresh. I am one of the trainer in Brilliant Minds where I will be teaching both technical and non-technical content. Right now you are watching SQL series. We have already completed 5 sessions and this is going to be the 6th one. Still, if you didn't complete those 5 videos, I have provided link in the description, go through that. Still, if you didn't subscribe to my channel, first subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon for more notifications. So, let us start the session. Welcome to our channel, Brilliant Mind. Today's concept is constraints. What is this constraints? Constraints are nothing but rules and restrictions that are implied on the table, particularly on columns. For suppose, if I take an example of cricket team, each and every cricket team will be following some rules and restrictions. For suppose if I take T20 format, in T20 format, each and every bowler can bowl only 4 overs so that they can play the cricket in an organized way. Same here also, if we use these constraints, which are nothing but rules and restrictions, by using these constraints, we can build a proper table in an organized way. Here you can see the proper syntax for a table where we will be using the constraints. Now, first thing what we have to do, we have to create a table. What is the query for creating a table? Create table, table name. And next you have to open the braces. Inside braces, what you have to give? You have to give the column names, which is nothing but column 1, column 2, column 3. In that way, you'll be giving the column names. Next to column names, you'll be adding data types for that particular column. For column 1, you'll be giving a data type. For column 2, you'll be giving a data type. In this way, you'll be adding the data types for that particular columns. After adding column names and data types, next to data type, for each and every column you are going to give the constraint name, and then you'll close it with comma. Each and every column you'll be closing with comma. Finally, you'll close the braces with semicolon. This is the proper way of creating table by using constraints. Each and every constraint will be having different set of rules. For suppose if I have a particular column, for that particular column I'll be using one constraint. Those rules are applicable only for that column. Here you can see some of the constraints what we have. First one is unique constraint, and second one is not null constraint, and next we have primary key constraint, and finally we have foreign key constraint, check constraint and default constraint. First, let us start with unique constraint. Unique constraint will be having some set of rules. Unique constraint will not allow the duplicate values, and also it will allow the null values. Let me take one example as student table to explain about this unique constraint. Here in student table, you can see some columns as student ID, student name, age and marks. For suppose if I take student ID, for student ID I am using unique constraint. If I use unique constraint for student ID, what it will happen? It will not allow the duplicates in student ID column. Now, what are the IDs I have in student ID? 01, 02, 03, 04. These are the IDs I'll be using in student ID column. For suppose if I repeat the same ID, if I use the same ID for another student, it will not take. Unique constraint will not accept it. This is the main rule for unique constraint. Let me take one more column. For suppose I will take student name column. In student name column, you can see some names Govind, Arun and Prajwal. For suppose if I use the same name as Govind for another ID, definitely it is not going to take, because here I am using unique constraint, which is nothing but the column will accept only unique things. Understood all of you? So we cannot use the same name for another ID. So what we are doing here for student name column, we cannot use unique constraint. Why we cannot use? Because there is a possibility of having two students having same name or not. If it is the possibility, then definitely we cannot use unique constraint for student name. Then for what we can use? We can use it for student ID. This is the first rule that you have to remember. What is the first rule? Unique constraint will not allow the duplicate values. What is the next rule? It will allow the null values. What are null values? Null values are nothing but empty data, which means it will allow the empty data. For suppose for student ID I am using, it is allowing the null values. Then what it will happen? For Govind, if I am not giving any ID also, it will take. For Arun, if I am not giving any ID also, it will take. This is unique constraint. Here null values are allowed. Did you remember, I guess? Now what are the two rules for unique constraint? Unique constraint will not allow the duplicate values and it will allow the null values. Hope you all understood completely about this unique constraint. Let us see the syntax of unique constraint. Now what is the syntax of unique constraint? We'll create a table, create table, table name. Here in this table, I'll be having some columns. What are the columns? Student ID, student name, age and marks. After creating the columns, next what I have to do? I have to give the data types for that. Now what is the data type for student ID? Integer is the data type. For student name, varchar and size is 10. For age, int I will be giving it. For marks also, int I will be using it. Now after completing of integer for student ID, there I have to give my constraint name called unique constraint. And then I have to close with commas, and finally I'll be closing the table with braces, and next I'll be closing it with semicolon. This is the proper syntax of creating a unique constraint in this particular table. Now the next one is not null constraint. Not null constraint ensures that a particular column of a table cannot allow the null values, but it can allow the duplicates. Let me take the same table for student table here. Now here in student table, you can see the same columns as student ID, student name, age and marks. Now here for student name, I'll be using this not null constraint. For suppose if I use this not null constraint for student name, what it will happen? Here it will not allow the null values. Null values means what? It will not allow the empty data. Definitely you have to give some data in student name column, but it will allow the duplicates, which means for suppose if you use Govind again for the different ID, definitely it will allow. But if you are not giving any name for that student ID, definitely it is not going to allow. These are the set of rules for not null constraint. Now here you can see the syntax for not null constraint. What is the syntax for not null constraint? First we have to create a table. Create table, table name, which is nothing but student. And then I'll be opening the braces, and in braces I'll be giving the column names. Column names are what? Student ID, student name, age and marks. And next I'll be giving the data types. What are the data types for that column? For student ID it is int, for student name it is varchar of 20, for age it is integer, for marks also it is integer only. Next what I have to do? I have to give the constraint. Where I have to give this constraint, for which column I am using? For student name column I am using. After data type, I'll be giving it as not null constraint, and then I'll be closing with commas, and finally I'll be closing the braces with semicolon. This is the proper way of creating a table with constraint, not null constraint. Here if you see, not null constraint is completely opposite for unique constraint. What are the rules for unique constraint? Unique constraint will not allow the duplicate values, but it will allow the null values. These are the rules for unique constraint. Now what are the rules for not null constraint? Not null constraint will allow the duplicate values, but it will not allow the null values. These both constraints are completely opposite. The next constraint which we are going to discuss is primary key constraint. This primary key constraint is the most important constraint of all the constraints. Here, this primary key constraint will be having two different rules. It is a combination of both unique constraint and not null constraint. It will be taking one rule from unique constraint and one rule from not null constraint. What are those two rules? Primary key constraint will not allow the duplicate values, and also it will not allow the null values also. Duplicate values not allowing, it is taking from the unique constraint, and null values it is not allowing, it is taking from the not null constraint. This is the combination of both unique and not null constraint. Now here if you see the student table, can you tell me where I can use this primary key constraint? For student ID if I take, each and every student, definitely you have to give the student ID or not. And that student ID, it should be unique. You cannot give same ID for the another student, and also you cannot leave the empty value for that student ID. If you leave empty value also, it is problem only. If you use the duplicates also, it is problem only. This is the main set of rules that you are using for primary key constraint. Now here what I am using? I am using student ID as primary key. There are some more set of rules for primary key constraint. What are those rules? Each and every table should have only one primary key column. We cannot use primary key constraint for another columns also. Only for one column we have to use this primary key constraint. By using this primary key, we are going to identify the rows, particular rows, which means if I take 0, 1, by using that 0, 1, I am going to identify the complete row of student name, age and marks. This is the main property of the primary key constraint. Let us write a query for primary key constraint. Here on the screen you can see student table. How to create a student table? Create table student, and next we have to open the braces, and then next we have to give the column names. What is my column name? Student ID, student name, age and marks. These are the columns what I have. Next I'll be giving the data types. What are the data types for student ID? For student ID it is integer. For student name it is varchar of size 10. For age it is tiny int. For marks also it is tiny int itself. Now next what we have to do? We have to use this primary key constraint. Where I have to keep this primary key constraint? I have to keep this primary key constraint for student ID column. Beside to data type, I'll be giving it as primary key constraint, and then next I'll be closing the braces and with semicolon. This is the proper way of writing a query for primary key constraint using student table. The next constraint what we are going to use is foreign key constraint. What is this foreign key constraint? Foreign key constraint is going to make the connection between two different tables. Let me take one example to explain about this. Here I have two different tables. First one is student table and next one is department table. Now in student table, what are the columns you have? Student ID, student name, age and marks. In department table, what are the columns you have? Department ID and department name. Now can you tell me, in student table, what is my primary key constraint? Student ID only? Yes. Now in department table, what is my primary key constraint? Department ID only? Yes. Now what I am doing, I am making the connection between department table and student table. How I am making the connection? This department ID where I have a primary key constraint. That department ID I am going to add in the student table so that the connection will happen between student table and department table. What are the rules for foreign key constraint? Foreign key constraint will allow the duplicate values and also it will allow the null values also, which means it is completely opposite for primary key constraint. In one table it is acting as a primary key constraint. If you add that column for another table, then it will act as a foreign key constraint where it will allow all the duplicate values and also it will allow the null values also. Why? How it is happening? In one table it is not allowing and in another table how it is allowing it. Let me tell you one brief about this. Now here if I add this department ID in student table column, there will be lot of students who will be having same department or not. Yes or no? For suppose if I take one college, in college there are 300 to 400 of students. In all these 400 students, there belongs to different departments or not. Now for each and every student you are mentioning the department ID there. Yes or no? If you are not mentioning the department ID also. Now let us write a query for foreign key constraint. Here in this foreign key constraint we are using two different tables. One is student table and one more is department table. Let me write first query for department table. Now how to create a department table? We'll be taking it as create table department and next I'll be opening the braces. In braces I'll be giving what? Column names. What are my column names? Department ID as one column, department name as one column I will take. For department ID, I'll be giving the data type. What is the data type? Data type is varchar of size 10. Now next I'll be giving constraint name. For department ID, what is the constraint name I can use? Primary key constraint. Next for department name, I have to give data type again. What is the data type I'm using here? For department name also, I'm using it as varchar of 5. Now next I'll be closing the braces with semicolon. This is the department table query. Next what I have to create? I have to create student table. How to create a student table? Create table student. Next you have to open the braces. In between you have to give the column names. What are the column names? Student ID, student name, age, marks. These are the column names. For all these columns you'll be giving data types also. What are those data types? For student ID you'll be giving it as integer. For student name it is varchar of 10. For age it is tiny int. For marks also it is tiny int. Here in this, for which column you are using primary key constraint? I am using it for student ID. In student table, primary key constraint I am using for student ID. In department table, primary key constraint I am using for department ID. Now here what I have to do? I have to combine this department table with student table. How I have to do? Near last column, after completing of the last column, what is my last column? Marks is my last column. After that I'll be giving it as department ID. Department ID, why I'm using it here? In department table, primary key constraint is department ID or not? Same column I'm using here also. Department ID and same data type also I have to use here. What is the data type here? Varchar of 10. Same data type I'm using here. Varchar of 10. Now in the next step, what you have to do? You have to tell it as foreign key. What is the foreign key here? Department ID. Department ID, foreign key, department ID references what? References to department table. In department table, what it is using it, which column it is taking? Department ID column it is using. And then next you have to close the braces with semicolon. Now here in department ID place, after to the marks column, in department ID place you can use any name. In place of department ID you can use any name there, whatever it is needed. Now this is the proper way of creating foreign key constraint. The next constraint which we are looking into it is check constraint. Check constraint ensures that it will check whether it is satisfying the given condition or not. What it will check? The particular column will check whether it is satisfying the given condition or not. Now we'll take one example to explain more about this check constraint. For suppose here I have a table, student table. Now in the student table I have student ID, student name, age, marks. Now here I'll be taking age column for using check constraint. For suppose in our college we are conducting one tournament. In that tournament, it's a cricket tournament. In this cricket tournament, lot of students are involved. But here what I am using, I am using one condition. What is that condition? The students whose age is greater than 19, only those students should participate in this tournament. Now what this check constraint will do, it will allow the students whose age is greater than 19 only. Only those students will be taken in this table. This is how we can use the check constraint. Now by taking one table, I'll be giving more clarity about this check constraint. Now here you can see one table where we'll be having student ID, name and age. Now student ID, I'll be taking it as 01, 02 and 03. Student names, I'll be taking it as Dhoni, Kohli and Rohit Sharma. Now here for suppose for Dhoni, if I give 18, if I use age column as check constraint, it is not going to accept. If I give 19 also, it is not going to accept. Because what I have told, it should be greater than 19. What is the condition I am giving here? In age column, it is checking whether the student is greater than 19 years or not. Now if I give 20 in this column, it will take. Next for Kohli, if I give 21 as age, it will take. Next in the same way for Rohit Sharma also, if I give 20 as age, it will take. This is the proper way of creating a table. Let us create a query to use this check constraint. Now here you can see the query. Now what we have to do, we have to create the student table, create table student. In this I'll be opening the braces and I'll be giving the column names. What are my column names? Student ID, student name and age. What are the student ID? Student ID I'll be giving it as data type. What is the data type I'm using here? Integer is the data type. Now student ID I'll be mentioning it as primary key constraint also. Now next for student name I'll be giving varchar of size 10. Next what I am using here? Age. For age what is the data type you can use? Integer. I'll be using it here. After integer, after giving space, I'll give here. What I'll give? I'll give the check constraint. In check constraint, after giving check constraint, I'll open the braces. In between these braces, I'll be giving the condition. What is the condition? Age should be greater than 19. And then next, I'll close the braces with semicolon. This is the proper way of writing query for check constraint. Now finally, we have default constraint. Default constraint will help you to use the value repeatedly in the same column. Now let me take one table to explain more about this default constraint. For suppose if you see the table, in the table you have student ID, student name, age, marks and grade. Now for grade column, I'll be keeping default as pass. If I keep default as pass, for each and every student, it will be giving it as pass only. Now here in default constraint, we have some rules that which we have to follow. Now for particular student, if you are giving it as pass, it will take. If you are not giving anything, which means if you are leaving it as empty, which is nothing but null value, then also it will take it as pass only. But particularly if you mention anything there, if you mention anything, it will be taking the same value. If you are not mentioning anything, it will take the default value. Now in one class there are 100 students. All 100 students will not get passed, right? Some of the students will be failed also. For suppose let us assume that out of 100 students, 6 students got failed. Now what I'll be doing in this column, in this grade column, I'll be giving pass for everyone. But who got failed? Those 6 members are there, right? For those 6 members, I'll be giving explicitly they got failed. Then it will be taking that value only. This is the proper way of using the default constraint. Now we will write a query for default constraint. Here we'll create the table and then we'll see what it will happen. How to create a table? Create table student. Next you will be opening the braces. In braces you will be keeping column names. What are the column names? Student ID, student name, age, marks and grade. Now for each and every column you will be keeping the data type. For student ID, what is the data type? Integer is the data type. Next for student name, I'll be giving it as varchar of 10. Next for age, I'll be using it as integer. For marks also, I'll be keeping it as tiny int. And finally, for grade column, I'll be using it as varchar of 10. Now here in this column, now first student ID, I'll be keeping it as primary key constraint. And next I'll be coming to the grade column. In grade column, after completing of data type, which is nothing but varchar, after that I'll be giving it as default pass. This pass, whatever it is there, I'll be keeping in the single quotes or double quotes. Definitely you have to remember this. Whatever you are using for default constraint, that value you have to keep in the single quotes or double quotes. And then next you have to close the brace and with semicolon. This is how you will create the query for default constraint. I hope you all got complete clarity on constraints. If you like the video, please like the video and share with your friends who are interested in learning SQL. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow us on Instagram page Brilliant Minds and Naresh Chaudhary 01. Thank you for watching.